Shalom everybody, and greetings VFI news supporters and anyone else watching this video. Today is September 1st. It's the first day of school in Israel, and it should be normally a day of joy. But that joy was tempered by some very sad news that we in Israel received this morning. The IDF announced that it has recovered the remains of 6 hostages who were kidnapped into the Gaza Strip by Hamas on October 7th and have been held in the tunnels underneath the strip ever since. Now, the news is made even more sad by the assessment by the medical forensic teams that these 6 hostages were alive until a few days ago, but were brutally murdered as the IDF rescue teams were closing in on their position in the tunnels underneath Rafah. It bears mentioning that the tunnel where the dead bodies of these 6 hostages were discovered was less than a kilometer from the underground bunker where Israeli Bedouin hostage Qaid Farhan Al-Qadi, age 52 from Rahat, was rescued last week. We were so overjoyed at the news that he'd been rescued and now were brought into the valley of sorrow by this news, that these hostages came so close to being rescued, but they were executed by their evil and spiteful captors who just didn't want to set them free. The names of the murdered hostages are Hirsch Goldberg Polin, Edan Yerushalmi, Carmel Gat, Almog Sarusi, Alexander Lobanov, and Ori Danino. If that first name rings a bell, that's probably because this young man was a U.S. citizen and his parents spoke just a few days ago at the DNC, or the Democratic National Convention in the United States, pleading with the assembled delegates to help bring their son home. Well, now he is home, but sadly all his parents can do is give him a dignified funeral. Reaction to the news came quickly, with U.S. President Joe Biden expressing his shock and outrage that Hamas had murdered these hostages in this way. He added a special word of condolences to the parents of Hirsch and called for a swift and unconditional return of all the remaining hostages. Now, this call was echoed by several other world leaders, including UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who rarely has a kind word to say about Israel, or even a word that isn't unkind. But it must be mentioned that a large number of people in Israel placed the blame for the deaths of these hostages at the feet of our Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This comes amidst a fierce debate inside the cabinet over whether or not to accept the terms Hamas has offered to release the remaining hostages. This includes moving the IDF away from the Philadelphia corridor, which marks the border between Israel and Egypt. Now, Netanyahu has flatly refused to agree to this demand, saying that if the IDF doesn't have and maintain physical control of this border, Hamas will use it again to smuggle in more weapons, rearm itself, rockets, missiles, whatever, and prepare to repeat the October 7th massacre again in a few years, if not before then. He might be right about that, but the IDF High Command is saying that they will closely monitor the Philadelphia corridor, and if it appears that smuggling has started again there, they can easily move in and take control of it again. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant backs this assertion and is reported to be furious with Netanyahu for not agreeing to a withdrawal in return for the hostages. Now, in this context, it must be said that the IDF has reported destroying over 80% of the smuggling tunnels that were running under the Philadelphia corridor before the war. So if Hamas or anyone else tried to rebuild them, it would take a lot of time, and Israeli intelligence has said they would get plenty of advanced warning. The families of the remaining hostages are also in broad agreement that this is the case and are calling for a general strike on Monday in order to pressure the government to agree to this plan. The Histadrut Labor Federation and most of Israel's large companies are declaring their support for this strike. Well, we'll have to see if this materializes. And like I said, the new school year just started, and it would be a terrible shame if it all stopped again because of a general strike. Be that as it may, I guess I better tell you what Hamas is saying too. A Hamas spokesman issued a statement Sunday morning saying these 6 hostages were actually killed by Israeli forces using American-supplied weapons. The good news is that this absurd fairy tale is unlikely to be taken seriously by anyone besides hardcore Hamas supporters and or Israel haters. The bad news is there's a lot of folks out there these days that are totally clueless, such as American university students. There's a lot of grown-ups who really ought to know better who will believe whatever anyone says that's against Israel, no matter how ridiculous. But even before we start dealing with that, there's another announcement from Hamas I need to tell you about. A Hamas spokesperson on Sunday called on supporters of the organization to rise up and begin attacking Israelis anywhere and everywhere they can. That's their real colors, folks. This call appears to have been taken seriously by at least a few Hamas supporters in Judea and Samaria. 2 car bombs were set off just a few minutes apart in the Gush Etzion community south of Jerusalem over the weekend, with at least one of them apparently being set off before it was even planned. The drivers of both vehicles had already exited their vehicles when the explosives detonated, apparently in preparation to carry out follow-on shooting attacks on first responders. But nearby security teams neutralized these terrorists before they could follow through with that part of their plan. However, there was a shooting attack Sunday morning which resulted in the deaths of 3 police officers, 2 male and 1 female. All of them left behind spouses and children. And one of the saddest parts of this also is that one of the police officers killed, his own daughter was killed fighting against Hamas terrorists on October 7th. Friends, I would ask you all to pray urgently for Israel. As I said at the beginning, it was the first day of a new school year, and usually that's a day when we smile and we're celebrating. But instead, we're all in shock, in mourning, and we're all bracing for what could be much more bad news in the hours and the days ahead. So if you can do more, please pray. Visit our website at visionforisrael.com and click on the Projects tab. There you'll see different ways you can help VFI care for the people of this land during dangerous times. One way you can do that is by providing training, equipment, ambulances for medical first response teams like the ones who were cared for of the victims of today's terror attacks in Judea and Samaria. Now, if things heat up, like Hamas seems to want them to, there'll be a lot more work for these first responders to do, and they're going to need all of our help to do it. In the meantime, friends, thank you for watching this special emergency update from VFI News. Shalom and God bless you.